Coming up next. Stay tuned to learn more about the state of blockchain education at major universities all around the world. Reimagine 2020.
Hey everybody, it is Patrick McLain, as you know, one of your hosts here for Reimagine 2020. I've done, I don't even know, 40, 45 interviews, something like that, some number. It's just like now in the 40s, the last, through the process of this. This is the first panel I've done. I had to specifically ask everybody here to change the time to meet it because I really wanted to be in this one because I think you guys are going to enjoy it. I think I'm going to enjoy it. But before I say too much, I want to introduce some of the guests here. You've got Paul, Eduardo, and Andre, and I'll go counterclockwise from my screen. But Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Paul Brody. I'm the global blockchain leader at v1.
Andre.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andre Semenov. I'm a director of supply chain innovation at Kona, the co-quantitative technology company for the Coca-Cola bottlers.
Last but not least, Eduardo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eduardo Coleman, and I am Global Innovation Manager at AB InBev, the largest brewer in the world. Happy to be here.
Now, does everybody watching this right now, whether you're one of the thousands of students or general blockchain enthusiasts, now do you know I want to be in this, right? These are some people that we want to listen to. If you care about integrating blockchain, whether it's in enterprises or just global adoption, right? I think three of the voices on this interview right now, or panel, whatever you want to call it, are going to be, part of the teams that kind of shape that future. So I was trying to think about how to start this because I think everybody has pretty unique perspectives, but I figure the best way might be, at least in my opinion, is to kind of zoom out. And, Paul, I think you probably talk to more companies, right, where Eduardo and Andre are really working on, their internal, blockchain solutions. But do you want to kind of just give everybody a bit of your opinion? Like, how do you view the enterprise space and blockchain? What's going really well and what excites you here over the next year or so?
So thanks. What's been going really well and what's moving the world along is this transition from blockchain tourism to kind of a more ROI-driven kind of delivery program. So there's a number of big transitions in the market that are underway. First, people are much more focused on actual return on investment. And that means a lot of the early stage things that were sort of internally focused have fallen away. Because the truth is, blockchains are network technologies, and doing a blockchain inside your own company is not usually that particularly useful. Second big transition that we see taking place in the market is a transition from private blockchains to public blockchains. Now, not everybody is there yet, right? And there's a lot of stuff that's already on private blockchains. But what everyone's come to realize is that if you want lots of companies to get on your blockchain and you want people to participate, you need to do it in a public network where the barriers to entry are very, very small. So that's kind of the second big transition that we see taking place in the marketplace right now. And then the third transition is the full integration of regulatory compliance. So this idea of blockchain as this place, the Wild West, where crazy stuff happens, is quite outdated, but it's become much more mature now. So our mission really is we're going to help companies do secure, regulatory compliant, private business transactions on public blockchains. And that seems to be resonating, and it's really just a question of making it simple enough, user-friendly enough, and value-driven enough that companies are going to switch it on and go do it.
Definitely. So a lot to unpack there, and I think really the points that you mentioned around public, private chains, I want to transition to here shortly, because I think I told a few people I learned a lot after the interview we had the other day, or I kind of had a little bit different perspective. But before we do that, we're going to go reverse order now. Eduardo, can you just tell us a little bit about, how you guys are thinking about blockchain, maybe some things you guys have tried in the past and kind of how you see, approaching it in the future?
Sure. So in AB InBev, I think that in the past few years, there has been an effort to really get a foothold in the blockchain space. It was clumsy in the beginning, but the intention was still there. I think that in general, for innovation in the company, how we work is we try to understand the problem that we have, or the issue or the challenge, and then identify the solution, right? So in that perspective, there have been some mistakes that we have learned from that worked in a reversed order. So we put in the forefront the idea of using blockchain, but we weren't really ready for it because we didn't really have use cases that would imply the use of blockchain being the exact solution, right? So we understood that the hard way, but I think that today we're in a place where following this mentality à la lettre will allow us to actually make the use of blockchain where it's needed, and not only for buzzwords or press releases that use that word. So following the problem, understanding it, and identifying if blockchain is an open blockchain, as Paul pointed out, is the direction, right? So we're trying to follow also that mentality, but really addressing the problem and identifying use cases for blockchain is kind of the mindset that AB InBev is trying to follow in innovation.
Appreciate that. And I want to pivot to Andre for a second, and then I kind of want to open this up conversation a little bit, right? Like let everybody, I think there's some points that everybody can kind of collaborate around. But, you know, Andre, I'll kick it to you. And you know, I'll say the thing I've always been most impressed with my conversations with you about Kona, just how kind of head first you guys had dove in, right? And how much you've been adopting blockchain. But, you know, how are you guys thinking about it?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Patrick. I want to start this with kind of echoing what Paul said and Eduardo as well. I believe that the future of the blockchain is the open blockchain and the public network. And I've been following the work that EUI is doing with their Nightfall framework and all the great work that they put in the open source community and contributed back. So I think this is great work that is taking us forward that goal. In Kona, we started our journey about two years ago, where we looked into the problems that we had, and we didn't want to start with, we have a blockchain now, hey, let's try and look around the company, what issues we have. Coca-Cola system historically is a franchise business network, and worldwide we have 250 bottlers who are operating as independent companies. They're independent manufacturers, independent distributors, and they work and aggregate up to the Coca-Cola company, which is a kind of motherhood of all the bottlers. In North America alone, we have about 70 bottlers, small, medium, and large size. And Kona has been working with the 12 largest bottlers in North America that are generating $20 billion revenue through the Kona ERP system. And we thought about the blockchain being an opportunity for us to connect other up to 70 nodes or 70 bottlers onto our internal blockchain, so we can tackle and solve some of the problems that we have today in supply chain. We see a lot of friction there, a lot of lack of transparency, lack of trust between the companies, because they're all independent companies. And some of these companies, they carry Coke products, and some of them carry half Coke and maybe half beer and wine. So we saw an opportunity for us to implement the internal network first to unlock some of the benefits and get the tangible ROIs that we're seeing right now back to the bottlers by just adding this transparency layer, trust layer between the bottlers, automating, optimizing transactions between them. But we're always looking into an opportunity to how do we either gradually evolve the framework we're using today into more of a kind of public open network, or we looking to enable new use cases on the public network. But we understood that 2 years ago, it wasn't in place, and now we're evolving. I think a year and a half ago, the one transaction on Nightfall was about $90 per transaction. Then it came down to $5 per transaction. And we wanted to start with something that we not only implement and start unlocking the value, but also have an education in our company for the people and the business leadership to understand what the blockchain is all about. And we felt like having a small step in that direction will help us understand better as technology evolves, we're going to be ready for it.
All right, so let's open this thing up a bit. And a lot of good points there. If I would say I heard one point, I heard public versus private multiple times. So I haven't done a panel in this format yet for anybody who's seen, I don't know what point in 72 hours we're at, but I haven't done a panel. So I'm going to try to take a clip from a debate. Paul, I think your name was mentioned, and Nightfall, you have 15 seconds to respond.
So, Andre, thank you. That's the only thing I can say, right? This is what, when I was listening to you say this, I was thinking, well, this is what we made Nightfall for, so that people would take it up, they would use it, they would think about how they would apply it. And I think the journey that Andre just described is so typical, right? We start internally, there's this huge educational ramp that's required to get people to sort of not understand how blockchain technology works, but to understand where it's actually useful. So if you're hoping for some kind of like a talk show style debate where we try to smash chairs on each other's head, you're going to be disappointed, because I think the path that they went down is.
I brought you guys all on here because I really felt you guys were going to get along. I've been talking to these guys, and I met you, and I think there's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, no, this is both Eduardo and Andre, the things that they described, that's exactly kind of the path that we're headed down. And the idea is we're going to put this stuff into the public domain, and companies are going to move down this path over time. I think the question I would pose to Andre, especially since you've been thinking about supply chain and you've been implementing this in a bunch of places, is tell me what you see the journey as going from tracking stuff to stuff that is financially material to the company. It's one thing to track where stuff is. It's another thing to say, okay, I'm going to integrate where I track stuff to the procurement process and the payments and the supply chain financing as well. And I'm just curious if you see a roadmap there.
Definitely. So what we implemented does exactly what you said. I think the long vision for us, as for the food and beverage company, is to get the end goal of a traceability, and look how we can be better on the recall. But as we go, we're looking to the purchase order to sales order to kind of all the supply chain transactions being visible. And the problem that we have there is that even though you have all these different suppliers and customers in our network, what complicates the network is we have a lot of rules that are applied at a national level. Who can produce what? Who can buy from who what? It's not an open market. So we felt like adding this layer using smart contracts and putting some business logic on network would simplify this communication, because what we saw that there was a lot of reconciliation requirements at the end of the cycle where it would take maybe 30, 50, 60 days to understand what happened in the supply chain and reconcile and get the payment out. And so essentially, the sellers were becoming banks for the buyers, and it wasn't sustainable. And there was a lack of trust there. And sometimes there would be, it's easier for me just to accept that discrepancy that you're claiming instead of me trying to go back in the history and reconcile it. And we're seeing an impact, tangible impact on the performance optimization of the human resource, the warehouses, the planners and buyers, and the evolution of it. What we're looking into, and I think the business will need to get there first, is if I can get a real-time information about what I shipped, what they received, and we both trust this information, I can take a further action. I can block my invoice from being sent out automatically, and I have someone go and check it, make a call to the warehouse, correct it immediately. So I can reduce my effort on reconciliation, but then on the end of this, I have a financial result. I can increase the cash flow. We're not talking about payments there yet, but I think the end goal would be, why don't you do the cross-company netting if you now have all this information and trust it?
Exactly.
And I want to bring you in here, Eduardo, too, just because I know what you guys really focus on, and maybe talk a little bit about the beer garage and how you guys kind of serve as like innovation arm. It sounds like, from what I understand, across multiple parts of the company.
Sure. Yeah. So the beer garage, located in Silicon Valley, more precisely in Mountain View, is the internal-facing emerging tech innovation hub for AB InBev. So we are in AB InBev's global organization, which serves all the different functional areas of the business. And what our role is really to connect our business to the outside world, to the emerging tech, to the innovation opportunities that exist and that are flourishing and developing every day, and understand how to best utilize those to improve our business and make it more innovative, make it more cutting edge, become a more tech-oriented company. We're known worldwide as you know, the beer company, the company that wants to bring people together for a better world. And our product, beer, is, I think, one of the main arguments for bringing people together in any circumstance. But we think that what's behind all of this and what pushes all of this and what makes this a success can really be found in the digital world today. I mean, we're in Industry 4.0. We have an unprecedented speed of development in digital systems, and some breakthroughs, some disruptions that have occurred and are occurring and are developing, where we still haven't really understood how we can include those in our business. And I think that we're improving, right? We're trying to improve our education of certain technologies and certain innovations to really see how we can bring those in for the best of the company, for a more profitable company. And I think that I'll throw in a subject around open public on this point versus private permissioned. I think that one very important point, one key point to being willing to adopt open blockchains in an enterprise environment is education. So I believe that there's a fundamental lack of education in the enterprise world in general around blockchain, but it's not enterprise fault. The fault, I think, lies to the hype, right? What the hype created. The hype was, you know, especially late 2017, when the crypto market surged at like an exceptional rate, an irrational rate, I would say. And so people just looked at Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as speculative assets that would create a short-term profit and make you rich fast. But I think that if you stop there, you will be fooled and you will make wrong decisions. However, if you have the willingness and the audacity to question yourself, question your understanding of these systems, then you can really understand how they're built and why open blockchain and cryptocurrency systems have no reason not to be adopted by enterprise.
So I have a question for you, Eduardo, but I do want to just add a comment to what you said, which is, I also honestly put some of the blame on the vendors of private blockchains here. They have gone around, and to sell private blockchains, they have hammered on a bunch of messages which are not fundamentally true. They say public blockchains are for criminals, right? That's all they're good for. They claim that you can only transact in cryptocurrencies if you use public blockchains. They say that their private blockchains are immutable record systems, which of course they're not, right? They say that private blockchains can do, you know, incredibly fast transaction settlement time, right? They lay out all these benefits, some of which are real, some of which aren't. One of my personal favorites is, you know, you guys both are in supply chain, right? Or you look at supply chains, you think about how product moves and is paid for, right? The typical way that companies interact is net 30, right? And the 30 isn't milliseconds, it's days. And people are like, well, you know, I can't have sub-second, you know, confirmations. Like, really? Is that going to make a difference in your supply chain, right? There's this fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's pushed into the market by vendors of private blockchain, selling features and benefits that they really can't deliver upon or are of little or no value. But I have a question for you. So that was my comment. The question I have for you, Eduardo, is you're in this global corporate innovation environment. How do you get your stuff from the corporate innovation environment into the line of business?
So that is a big challenge. You hit a very good point. It is a big challenge because if you think about it, relatively speaking, having a department for innovation within the overall technology umbrella is something that is relatively new, right? So there aren't many. So if you look, I'll take a step back. If you look at the ecosystem in general, you have at a high level, small companies, startups that have either a nascent product or a service that differentiates them from big players, where they can bridge the gaps for big players or bigger players, I would say. Then you have corporations, right, that are established, that have presence in markets, in our case, globally. And those, have an advantage because they're already very strong in everything they do and in their core business. But if you think about it, bringing a piece of the startup world, of the innovation world, directly into corporations that are based on legacy systems where change is slow to be implemented, then you're creating something new. You're creating a new ecosystem, a new environment. So you're right. It's not a swift implementation, and it is a challenging relationship. But I think that in AB and Bev, there's an understanding that if the company does not innovate, it will go out of business, regardless of how big it is. And if the company is not on the forefront of technology, and our solutions group is there for that, then it will be surpassed by competitors very fast, very quickly. So in the minds of the people in the business, in the corporate environment, and in the minds of the people that are put on the front line of the innovation emerging tech ecosystem, there is this thought. And we know that it is by being willing to try and fail, to create new relationships that work, even the hard way, by doing benchmarking, analyzing success stories, extracting examples of good ways of working that have proven results in different or similar environments, is how we think we're going to improve this pain point or improve this challenge. And this is what we're doing today. We're analyzing our past mistakes. We're analyzing past frameworks that were put in to create a swift relationship between the business and the innovation external facing part. We're also talking to partners, to other companies, to understand, how to put in place the best system for us, for our environment. And I think that we're on the right path, but it will take time and we have to be patient.
All right. So, I think, and I'm going to try to narrate this, a lot of smart people, for anybody watching, again, if you are a college student watching and trying to figure out what you want to do with your career, or you have some big dream of an application in enterprise blockchain, you want to make a blockchain app that reaches 1 billion people, okay, these are the people you should be listening to, right? I'm going to kick it to you here, Andre. So what I just heard you guys say, and I'll pull out a few points, right? It's that a bunch of people have tried it. There was a huge learning curve. We can debate where that learning curve came from or not. It sounds like maybe some of it was misinformation, right? Mismarketing, whatever. I feel like sometimes just mentioning the word blockchain, and I've said it across many calls this week, it's like I know students that form on-campus organizations for blockchain 2 years ago, and they're getting cease and desist letters from universities because it's like, we don't deal in drugs, right? So and you get to this point where there's these token sales and you have this misalignment of public versus private. So for me, there's always inherently been this thing around blockchains. Like as soon as people hear it, I used to hand my grandma a smartphone and I don't do smartphones, or I don't do Facebook, right? And those things always slowly graduated. Right. So I feel like there's been I don't do blockchain, or blockchain scares me kind of mentality. But if we zoom out,
that.
Yeah. So and Andre, I'll kick it to you. So what are the things that actually matter, right? I think a lot of people could say blockchain does everything. To me, and correct me, to me, it's kind of like it can do an identity. it can do a ledger, right? And we can go from on one end very private and controlled to the other end very public. And there's a bunch of factors there. And then there's a bunch of things that kind of happen once you have those in place. But like, how are you guys thinking about it in the most elemental terms? How are you getting through that noise?
Well, so first of all, we want to partner with our business on the innovation. So we have the innovation tech group that we are running in Kona, but we have formed councils with the most bright brains from the business, from the field. And also in our conversation about blockchain, we try not to use the B word anymore, because this could scare people, or let them think about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency hype, and then even before that, Silk Road or other projects that were associated with something that is not legal. So we talk about the concept and about the business benefits that they're going to get, and design the solution from the perspective so that people don't even know they use blockchain, right? I don't even have to pass my grandma test, because with the implementation we have today, people haven't changed their routines at work, what they do. We changed some under the hood stuff, but they don't even know that it's happening on different nodes, for example. Or
do you come to the point where you're literally like, don't say the word blockchain? Like where you just try to do it in the background, where people literally, you make a point not to tell them?
Just don't use the word if it's not appropriate to do the comment about blockchain. Especially when it's new business people, you can refer to some of the technologies, but we don't really advertise, don't really hype them up that this project needs to be approved just because it's a blockchain project.
Well, and I'd like to go to you, Paul, because I think you talk to a lot of people, right, in this realm. What are you seeing there? I mean, is that kind of consistent across, or people are evolving a bit?
So we don't go quite as far as Andre does, right? So we do say the word blockchain, and in fact, sometimes it's helpful to directly address that. I used to jokingly tell EY partners I'm going to teach them how to do money laundering properly, and that usually gets their attention in a room full of accountants. But so it's helpful to direct it. But what the discussion that we have a lot internally is, let's lead with the value that's being created, right? Let's start with saying we have a solution for procurement, we have a solution for inventory management, we have a solution for how companies can manage networks of enterprises and businesses, right? And it is built on blockchain, right? And we built it on blockchain for some really good reasons, right? There are some good reasons to talk about blockchain. It's the only system that's out there that allows you to have complex multi-party transactions without a centralized intermediary. And I believe, whether or not you talk about blockchain or other things, if you look at how companies have evolved over the last few decades, it's very interesting. There's this huge divergence. So inside companies, they have embraced state-of-the-art technology. There's ERP, there's advanced planning and scheduling with constraint-based scheduling, there's analytics, there's machine learning running on top of the core data sets. So companies internally have been very sophisticated in their embrace of technology. How do most companies transact with each other externally? They're doing EDI, which is, literally as old as I am, which is ancient, right, in tech terms, right? It's basically business-to-business text messaging. Now, why do companies stick with business-to-business text messaging for most of their orders and purchase orders and delivery notices? They stick with those things because over and over again, whenever they sign up for some kind of digital intermediary, some kind of marketplace that's supposed to connect buyers and sellers and organize these flows, these companies that are trying to manage these digital interactions, they're never content just to connect the buyer and the seller. They always turn into predators, right? These marketplaces, and it's not an accident, whether it's in car sharing or financial services or apartment sharing, that the marketplace operator is worth more than the participant. And that's because by becoming an intermediary, you don't just get to connect the buyer and seller. You see all the information. You can change the tilt of the playing field. Usually you tilt it towards yourself. And on a blockchain, we can finally have all the digital complexity of a digital marketplace, all the coordination of process, the business rules that you talked about, Andre, like that govern the bottling systems, Eduardo, things like replenishment planning. You can do all of that stuff without having a centralized intermediary. So that could tilt users against you. So I think if we don't talk about blockchain, if we don't talk about the fact that you can have complex interactions without intermediaries, I think companies won't really understand why this is so important and useful in doing. So I'm going to get off my rant here, but that is, to me, that's the reason to talk about blockchain and the reason to emphasize the value proposition.
Yeah, I think, if I may here, I'm not on the same, I will forever talk about blockchain. I will forever adopt the word blockchain. And there's this tendency lately of saying distributed ledger technology to avoid saying blockchain, because blockchain might be associated with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is cryptocurrency, and cryptocurrency funds criminals and terrorist activities and drug lords and
also your grandmother's pension fund.
And this as well. But anyways, what I wanted to say is that I think this fear of, in the enterprise world, this fear of using blockchain word because it might attract a negative connotation is due to the fact that open blockchains utilize a financial reward to ensure a security mechanism, and the cryptocurrency, or well, in this case Bitcoin, that was the first one. Bitcoin introduced the blockchain technology to the world. So the cryptocurrency peer-to-peer cash digital system was the one that introduced the blockchain technology to the world. What the blockchain does, the open, public, borderless, censorship-resistant blockchain does, is that it utilizes the cryptocurrency as a financial reward, as a measure to keep the players self-interested, but at the same time collaborating massively. So a system of collective self-interest, powered by mass collaboration, is what this allows. And if you remove the cryptocurrency, which again is often misregarded as a simple, just a way to transact, but it's much more than that. If you analyze also the macro, like the economic structure of the Bitcoin protocol, it's engineered in such a way that you should be able to avoid giant bubbles and like major crisis in the environment. I won't go into that because that could be the subject of a completely different panel. But if you remove the cryptocurrency, then you don't have the assurance of a trustless system that functions and is powered by individual interest. You remove the security mechanism, you remove the financial reward, you remove a punishment mechanism that ensures that things happen the way that they should happen in a decentralized system. And if you remove the cryptocurrency, if you remove the reward mechanism, the financial reward mechanism, then you are very likely to fall into security holes once again and have to rely on institutions. When people say, if you trust the institution, you trust the blockchain. It's not a novelty. It's business as usual that is transplanted to this innovation, to try to take a hold of this innovation and move it into legacy systems. But if enterprise gets to the sufficient level of education that they can analyze the components for what they are and not for what media portrays them, or like various institutions portray them, then they will be able to adopt open blockchain, crypto token-based blockchains that have such beautiful characteristics and will allow business to flourish and to move at unprecedented rates. Okay, I'll stop here for my rant now.
We need. Well, I'm gonna put Eduardo for like chief marketing officer of Bitcoin. He's gonna bring the passion. But I think okay. So I think you guys are all talking about something interesting, right? And I guess kind of bringing me to my next point. I've found this. If I didn't know it before, I know it more after the last week or so. For everybody listening, getting ready for this conference, is I had spent 2 hours with Roger Ver there night, right? And I really, it was like he at a time in this, he took it amongst himself to like be the marketing guy for it, right? So where I think when I look at this as a technology, it just Bitcoin or blockchain can't just be a technology. It's got to be this thing that has like Silk Road bolted to it, right? It's got to be this thing that has like a whole generation of funding mechanisms through ICOs bolted to it that like put a bad taste in investors' mouth, whatever, right? It's a technology that does not have, or at least at its core components, anyone to fight back, right? I almost feel like, how when you see marketing campaigns like Got Milk, right? It's like the entire milk industry, right, went and like pooled resources and ran a campaign. So at some point here, for anyone listening that cares, pool your funds together and run a campaign about what blockchain is or isn't, right? If you raised $1 billion on an ICO and you barely launched a wallet, put some of your money into a blockchain disinformation campaign. I'll give you more respect next time we do something like this. But, so when we look at your guys' organizations, and I'll go to you, Andre, and then I'll pivot to you, Paul. But when you look at your organizations, you've obviously tried pilots, or you've seen pilots across companies. What were the roadblocks? And like, where were those roadblocks 2 years ago that aren't there now? Are they internal, right? Are they moments where there was an internal champion, right? Because this is the only guy that could like had the courage to be the blockchain guy in his office, right? And then that guy left, and then like a pilot fell apart. Or there was a consortium and there was multiple factors. Maybe somebody was late to the game. They weren't happy, or integration took too long. But like, what have you guys seen, Andre? Like, what were those roadblocks? How did you guys solve them? And then do you feel like you're in a really good place now, or there's still a lot of things to figure out?
Yeah, I think one of the roadblocks I would position number one is the leadership support of the initiative, right? So they have to not only understand and then say, yeah, it's a cool technology and go ahead and learn about it, but also allocate budgets and have some value behind it. And I'm not sure how the Innovation Garage is funded and being Bev, but we always try to. We know innovation is fail fast, fail, try it again. But at the end, you still have to think about the end result. Start with the use case and start with the leadership support. So this is one of the obstacles that we saw, and I think we're in a really good place because Kona has been abstracted from the corporate environment 3 years ago as we spun off and we created our own company just to be more innovative, more agile. And then within Kona, we organized the innovation department there, so we can learn faster. You have this funding to go try and fail. But everybody will be happy if you deliver the end result and it brings value. So I think this is one. And secondly, just picking the right use cases and having the right leadership in place is also important because we only have so much time to adopt blockchain in the enterprise. It's not going to be for always, right? We've been talking about it since 2017, the hype of a cryptocurrency, and then hype in the enterprise world, everybody talking about hundreds of use cases. But then as they saw the use cases, they don't really make sense on the blockchain. Maybe they move on to another technology that completely stop investing into it. They might lose attraction of what really can be delivered there. So I think just making the right use cases and pitching to them and try to deliver value, put them in production, prove that it's working and it can work better than EDI, for example. Just have this first step. Tell them, it could be your EDI replacement that you struggle with and you pay a lot of money just to enable another EDI connection with some other participant trading partner. So just do it step by step, level by level, try to unlock the value and bring the adoption, because at some point the enthusiasm will just be ended and it just have so much time to adopt the technology.
Got it. And Paul, I'll pivot to you, but I want to hear what you're saying. And do you think because I feel like I'm in enough of these conversations where I start to pick up, and I know you probably do more than me, but I feel like I hear the same things over time where it's like people feel like there's a lot of blockchain ideas. So it's like they don't want to hear about ideas anymore. They want to see execution. But the other side, I feel like the kind of tools they could put in place to handle execution aren't necessarily there. So it's like to even find out if an idea is good, it's such a pain that you create this double-sided problem. But what are you seeing in this space?
So we ourselves have been through this enormous evolution over the last few years. So if you go back to 2016, right, we're sort of spinning our wheels saying, what should we make, right? Should it be notarization or tokenization, public chains or private chains? And so we kind of worked our way through a lot of sort of fundamental questions early on. And by 2017 and into 2018, we were building product. And what we learned during the course of the build of that product was exactly what you described. It's hard to get product live. It's hard to get it integrated with enterprise systems and ERP. It's hard to show the delivery use case. And we had a couple of just experiences where we were just like kicked in the face, just really brutally. Like we did one for a big company, and we came to the end of we're having this conference call with them at the end of the prototyping and proof of concept phase. And they're like, this is going to work for us. It meets all of our requirements. We're going to save hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're not implementing. And we're like, wait, what happened, right? And the answer was, we don't want to go first. Blockchain, new, scary, too much of a big leap for us, right? So we got hit with the we don't want to go first ones. That's a tough and painful one to get smacked with. And then we had another experience, which was also an incredibly formative experience for us, where the client asked us to build a smart contract that embodied the rules of their business process. And we did that. And the client said, at the end of the process, the client told us that they didn't think that we had built the smart contract we said we built. And this also was like a bit of a head scratching moment. I mean, we definitely built it, right? And what we realized was, the client doesn't actually have any engineers on their own to actually make that determination, right? So how did they make that determination? They made that determination by looking at our terrible user interface and seeing no evidence that a smart contract was actually in operation, right? One of the foundational principles of UI design is you show people what's happening. You don't hide it from them. And you give them a sense of how much longer is this download going to take or what's it doing right now. So these two things led us down the path where we are today, which is a couple of things. Number one, we focus very hard on getting flagship use cases that are public and repeatable, so that we don't have to tell anybody you're going to be first, right? We're very careful about that and sort of building the right support. And where they are going to be first, we're very careful about screening those clients. Secondly, as we moved along, we switched from building individual applications to building a SaaS application, which is blockchain.ey.com. And the reason that we did that is, in the individual SaaS applications, what happened was you'd take like the core ops-chain technology, you'd fork it, and you'd make a version of it. And so somebody would make a version over here that had a really great user interface. And somebody would make a version over there that had a new type of token. But they weren't bringing it, they were treating it too much like a consulting business. They weren't bringing it back into the core product. And by forcing everything into a SaaS application at blockchain.ey.com, if you want to build a new token type, it gets built on the platform for everyone. And we have a professional user interface designer that is designed to show people what they're getting and how they're experiencing it, and have a consistent UI experience. So it's been this transition from research outfit to maybe sort of product development or consulting organization with digital assets towards proper software company with real user interface. And every transition has honestly come by being kicked in the face by a client and discovering that like whatever we thought we were doing, it just wasn't working.
And actually, it's the second time I talked to you, and I realized there's something I really want to know. Do you feel like, I'm starting, my gut feeling, the more I've been in technology a long time, built many products, apps, UIs, blah, blah, blah. Integrations, third party, it's all a pain in the ass. When you have to go, if you treat it as a custom installation every single time, it's not fun, right? So my question is do you think that every single time there's a blockchain implementation, it's like there's a new UI? Or, I mean, literally, if somebody's taking an action.
No, there shouldn't be. I have a philosophy that we haven't been fully implementing yet. But here's my kind of theory. Every business process should be representable in a combination of tokens and smart contracts, right? Tokens are things, right? If you think about how two companies interact, it's always, I have stuff, you have money, we're exchanging them subject to some terms and conditions and rules. So if I have the right type of tokens to represent my product, real or imaginary, and you have the form of money I want, and we can end the smart contract so that the rules under which that exchange is done, it shouldn't require a completely new representation. My goal is to get to a model where I have a library of tokens, I have a library of smart contracts, I know how to build new smart contracts, and when we're done, I can compose for you almost any business process that you can think of from this. It's like going to Taco Bell, right? They have 3 ingredients and a spackle gun with guacamole in it, and yet there are 400 items on the menu, right? That's the vision.
And none of them are 100% beef.
But it's the vision of just-in-time component-based solutions, right?
But okay, so hey,
simple menu.
Hang on, all right. So and I want to get to you in a minute, Eduardo. But I think this part is critical. So can you give me an example where you would say that either a token or a smart contract is replacing some other piece of software, or maybe they were using, a software before where it was a handoff between the signed document of a lab result of a product from a farm to the next? Like, why can't it just be in the same software, but when the user clicks save, like everything happens in the background where it's like nothing really changes for them? Or do we really need to pull UI elements that like make them aware of this?
So my goal is that for most users, if you're inside of a company and you're using, say, SAP or Oracle as your ERP system, when you click send on the purchase order, you don't know where it goes. All you know is you click send on the purchase order. Now, the fact that the recipient of that purchase order is at the other end of the blockchain is great. And when they send the invoice, it comes to you through the blockchain, but all you know and care about is it came to you through your Oracle user interface. So you need a UI for 2 things. Right, and this was also kind of this was another lesson that we learned, right? Because I was with you before, it's like, why do we need a user interface if all the substantive stuff is done through the ERP system? The answer is 2 things. Number 1, you can't demo from an ERP system, right? And if you can't demo, you can't explain a product, right? Number 2, right? Every supply chain ends in a small village in China or India or Thailand or somewhere where they do not have an ERP system and they are going to use the web, right? And number 3, right? Certain things do need to be set up, configured, and managed at the network level, and for that you need a user interface. So we came to realize that even if 99% of the work takes place without a user interface, you need a UI. You're silent, at least for me.
If you sorry, I got lost for a second, but if you go to that part in the countries that don't have software, or you're saying that there's countries that are not using ERP systems, whatever, right? They don't have they don't use, the usage rates of like common software systems aren't as high. Do they use? Are you saying, like, by your experience in research, that they use, like, they're not using much software in general, or that, so
a farmer who's selling their product in rural India or China has got a smartphone. That's it, right? So you got to have a UI that they can go to an address on the smartphone, take a picture of their product, and say, "Click, I shipped it," and that should generate a token.
Patrick,
so inherently,
let
me get this last part out. But inherently, what you're saying is that there is another element bolted on, which is that you can't use blockchain with certain people, like, especially an example like supply chain, unless people start to adopt tech, right? Like at some point in the process.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't matter what it is, right? If you want that farmer who's giving you the raw materials to integrate into your digital supply chain, somewhere, somehow, that information has to become digital.
Got it. All right, Eduardo, kicking it to you. Whatever you want to say, but I also would like to just hear, because again, I think you have a unique experience in this, where whereas Andre is probably, you know, a bit more focused exactly on the execution, what they're doing at Kona. You kind of talk across multiple parties, you know? So what has that experience been like? What are those areas like, you know, that have, would you guys say, if you look back, you know, you've seen roadblocks, you've tried to evolve around, and then I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah. So I'll come back to your question, Patrick. But I'll first make some points off of what Andre and Paul said in the last intervention. So the first thing is you know, of the last point that Patrick and Paul, you guys made, there is a great example of what AB InBev has done in 2018 of like, I think it was point 2 in your argument, Paul, the fact that you have some suppliers or players in the supply chain that, you know, don't necessarily have very sophisticated or well-organized ERP systems that can support or feed data into a blockchain, and therefore need a UI, right? So there's a project that we did in 2018 with BanQ, with our farmers in Zambia. Just so you know, in Africa, the supply chain is quite fragmented. There's very high number of small players, of small farmers that supply product to us. And for this particular use case, it was cassava, which is an ingredient that is sometimes used for certain beers. And what we built with BanQ was a blockchain solution for those farmers to be masters of their finances, to be able to integrate the banking world, because those are people that don't have easy access to banks. And even if they do, their likelihood of being able to open a bank account is very reduced. But in the spirit of what Paul said, the key enabler to that was mobile applications, right? Being able to access the data and share the data on the blockchain through mobile applications. And I think that played a key role for adoption, because you're bringing in, think about it, you're bringing in blockchain solution into an ecosystem of rural farmers, more than 2,000 of them, right? More than 2,000 of them. And you're telling them you will use blockchain to get a recognizable economic identity, manage your finances, and know who owes money to you. They're gonna be like, what is blockchain? How do I use this? And if you try to push, you know, the very ugly infrastructure to them, the adoption will probably fail. Now, if you have a user interface that is user-friendly and that provides with the key connectors to the blockchain and the backend infrastructure that allows all the magic to happen, your adoption will likely be more successful. And this is exactly what happened with the BanQ application that we built with BanQ in Zambia for our rural farm.
And that example has always impressed me, right? Because I could say from my perspective, sometimes I feel like you talk to certain enterprises and it's like they want all these bulletproof applications, right? Or that now they're like, okay, we want the killer things, right? We've tried some stuff. Maybe it was for PR, maybe it was for whatever. Maybe we really took it seriously. Maybe we didn't. Maybe we just wanted to float out there that we were touching blockchain, but there's like never really been a commitment, right? And then on the other side, I think you clearly see companies that have doubled down on it, right? And what the results have kind of reaped from that. But, you know, I feel like at some point, at least to me, blockchain is not hyper complicated, right? Like we have a team of developers, we build projects, we work on stuff. So I don't know, but I know a little bit about it, but it's not like that. This is like building a rocket, right? I mean, it's a signature. It's a different way of distributing data. You can build different UIs around it, right? Now, I feel like if people are taking the strategy of everything needs to be led by, we could sit on a napkin and like probably just abstract out the use cases, right? And I just feel like the way nobody's going to get there is if there's just all these barriers, right? We went over some of them earlier. Maybe it's internal. Maybe it's psychological at some point, right? Like you can be like, I have the best or you said it, Paul, like, we love your idea. It's going to save us so much money, but we're not going with it, right? Like in any other business sense, you would just be left speechless, right? But you know, that's what I always loved about the example what you guys did, I think in Zambia, Eduardo, but it was like a side effect, right? Like you guys were trying, if I remember reading it correctly, you guys there was like a tax break where when you use local farmers, but you guys couldn't prove it because they didn't have bank accounts. So therefore you had to, right, trying to help them. And I'm paraphrasing, pause me if I'm wrong. And then, there was, then there was this side effect, right? Because the farmers got more legitimized, right? Now they were able to get loans, right? Now they were bringing the ledger documentation to an institution who would give them product, right? So, I want to go to you in a second, Andre, but like, I just really do believe that, like, if the infrastructure is in place, if we demystify this, we don't need 1,000 UIs. It's not that complicated. Most of the actions that are happening are already happening in current softwares, right? So, I guess how are you guys looking at that, Andre? Like, did you guys, and again, what's something that always really impressed me about Kona is that from the outside is I feel like you guys have done a lot of stuff, but like when you first went at it, was it everything was custom and now you guys have streamlined it a bit? Like yes or no? And then I guess if yes, like, are you seeing results from that? Like, are you deploying applications more quickly? Like once you got that base layer, and fear out of the way.
So I think to answer the question, and coming back to what Paul said, the user who are using the blockchain or they're sending the documentation, they're using the scanning guns at a warehouse and they scan the pallet numbers for tracking purposes, goes to blockchain. They don't know it's happening to the blockchain, right? So the UI is important because this is the way they're interacting with the system. So we try to embed the blockchain actions, transactions to what they already had through, the Open REST API. We built the APIs, we did a lot of work, but now how do we plug it in so it's really useful for the user? And then the stuff that we had a gap for is, where do I find now this ledger where all the information is reconciled? So we built a pretty sophisticated UI, not sophisticated, but really good UI. We had a UX designer. We had a brainstorm session. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are the screens that we need, what the navigation should be, what's the information that the user will be looking for, and put this simplistic design with a connection into the blockchain so we can pull all the information real time. So I think it's important for adoption. And when I said we're not talking about B-word, we're not saying to users that this is on a blockchain. They just go, it's a web app or this is the ERP screen. And it helped a lot because they don't have to learn new transactions. They don't have to do things differently or do things twice in different places. So, the blockchain is not rocket science. 20% of it is just development and 80% adoption and change management and training. But you can avoid this change management and training by creating really good, simple UIs and integrating into the existing ERPs.
Love it. All right. So for everybody listening, again, students, general people, industry people, right? I know a lot of them are on. 3 of them are here right now, right? Pay attention to this conversation. Go back, hit rewind on this one after, right? This is something you're going to want to listen to, right? Like these are points that I feel like there's a lot of the community that's very confused, right? Like it's not just we built something, go and deploy it. That's not what's going to get billions of like transactions and all the validation and bandwidth we need to kind of improve the product in the space, right? It's very hard to build a tech product in a silo, right? Like no matter what you do in a tech product, when it goes live, when it's put to strain and put to use, you're going to learn lessons, and only way to get there, right, is kind of shake hands a little bit with, I think, some of the people in the industry that are innovative, care, are good stewards, good partners, right? And if you have a startup in blockchain and you want to know how to kind of approach an enterprise customer, right, or what that mindset looks like, these are guys to listen to. So we're already running a little over. I had to get these guys on last minute, and I'm very glad I did. So I want to try to wrap it up here in the next few minutes, but I'm gonna kick it to Paul for a second because I don't want you guys to gang up on him, and then I'll let you guys go. But and I'm on a little bit on your side, Paul. So, or at least day to day. But what would you tell somebody like Andre or Eduardo, right, from the Coker or AB InBev, Kona, like what is the thing that you see people in their position sometimes that they might not understand, something that is just burning inside of you that you wish everybody would know in the explanation process? And what would you kind of relay to them?
So the problem is, like, I feel like Eduardo and Andre don't have some of the misconceptions that really become burning problems. Like, they already understand the value of public blockchains. They understand kind of the need for open systems. They've gone through the experience of trying to educate folks. You know, I would say the thing that's so frustrating sometimes is, you know, on top of all the other things we've talked about, I often deal with people who are like, I want to use this type of blockchain, or I just read about this new kind of blockchain and it's so awesome. It does all these things. And what I think people really forget is that standards wars are won not by the best technology. In fact, you could almost argue the best technology never wins. And I refuse to get sucked into an Ethereum is better or worse or discussion like that. I think the thing that is important and that's worth hitting on over and over again is, I want to build, operate, and transact in the digital environment that has the most developers and users, right? And so if one day that changes, if Ethereum is eclipsed, then we'll move on from a solution and delivery standpoint. But otherwise, you know, networks are all about compromises. And the single most important characteristic of a network are the number of participants and their engagement with the network. And that outweighs almost anything else. And I think that's what a lot of people miss. They latch onto some cool new blockchain technology and they're like, well, will you take your off-chain product and put it on whatever it is? And, you know, the answer is no. I cannot make great software on 20 different platforms, right? So we're going to make it great software on one platform, and we're going to be the best at it. And that's not quite the question you wanted to answer, because I don't have an argument with Eduardo and Andre, because they've gone through this whole cycle and they've seen all of these issues already. So.
No, and I'm just to visualize, right? Just for the people in their position, right? Like, and I think you made a lot of good points. I mean, you can go back to this. I mean, there's different trains of thought of all technology, right? Apple, walled garden, they want to build everything themselves, right? Didn't scale as well in the beginning. Okay, now they have a different version of the iPhone. Now it's scaled very well. They still don't sell a lot of laptops comparably, right? And then you have had for many years the Windows of the world, right? That said, we're going to be less tight, but we're going to run on many things, right? And we're going to our win for the world is going to be that.
They run on many forms of hardware, but it's a very good analogy, because, you know, it's an operating system, and, you know, ask yourself how many people actually develop. I mean, there really is only one big PC operating system and one small one. There's one big mobile operating system and one small one. And you make a very compelling argument, neither of them are the best at what they do. They're just the number one and two most popular. That's all.
Wait. Which is the big and small smartphone operating system?
Android and iOS.
Android is bigger than iOS.
It is. That's my point, right? Windows is bigger than. Okay. Now, Apple has a particularly brilliant kind of strategy, which is, we're not going to make the most, but we're going to make a lot of money at it. But the point isn't these specific companies. My point simply is that platform-based marketplaces tend to consolidate into one very large kind of market-leading platform, and usually one somewhat secondary one. But that's it. There's really, by the time the market matures, there's pretty much nothing else.
Well, and I want to pivot. I know you got to run in a minute, Andre, and I will try to respect everyone's time. But I want to pivot to you guys in a second. But to piggyback on that, Paul, one thing that's very interesting for me when I look at the blockchain space, right? I look at it and I say, okay, there's a ton of platforms, right? Like I talk to all of them. They're like, we deal with them in tech, we deal with them like education, whatever, right? Now, I use the example of the iPhone, where it is that you'd say 2007, 2008, it comes out, gets the first users. Around 2008, 2009, you see like the first G1. It's kind of a piece of shit device. You get a little bit better hardware. The hardware is like kind of at par, but I specifically remember this. People would not switch to Android for about a year or two because you didn't have Instagram app on it, or you didn't have Fruit Ninja, right? So there was a whole app store in iPhone that wasn't there on Android. So then what did Google do? They went and started paying developers to actually port their applications over to their platform, right? And then I think if you follow that market going out the next around 2010, 2011, go out, people could build applications in two ways, I guess, more or less. I'm sure I'm missing some, but it's A, you could do it natively, right? So you could write the code in native iOS and native Android. It's a bit harder, you get more control, but then you could do cross-platform compilers, right? So if you're making a game, things like Unity or
right. If you want your user experience to suck, I highly recommend a cross-platform approach.
We might agree to disagree. I mean, I definitely agree. Like when you go as the deepest level, and there's other implementations of it where you could like hit the UI layer and stuff like that. But I definitely agree. You have some detracted benefits. But if you look at the explosion of the App Store, I would also argue that a lot of it, in pure volume, a large. Actually don't have the numbers in front of me. If I were to guess, I would say 50%, if not more, of apps are built on cross-platform compilers, right? Where they just click a button and it's on all platforms. And my point here is, and I'll wrap it up, I don't understand, and I use CryptoKitties as an example. So CryptoKitties launches, it breaks Ethereum, too much volume, right? Now, we will never know at that same time, in that same circumstance, and because we don't actually need UI in these blockchain apps to deploy it, if it's just running on, if it's being executed on the platform, but we would never have known why platform would CryptoKitties have taken down Stellar, would have taken down Neo, would have taken out, right? So I guess to wrap up my question, I want to pass it to these guys, but like, do you feel like at some point, how do enterprises even test blockchains if they're not comparing them, right? Because I feel like they're barely making pilots for one blockchain. Like, wouldn't it be good to know that when you click save on the application, that the data just went to 3 different blockchains? Now, there would be a slightly different implementation to each one, but at least you would be able to see the comparison.
I think they're posing that question to Eduardo and Andre, so I won't get into it.
Andre,
No, I mean, I was aiming it at you, but would like your thoughts. I'll ask them a different question. This one's at you.
So again, it comes back to, first of all, there really aren't good sort of cross-platform systems. Secondly, if you dive into the iOS and Android App Store, the apps that are at the top, the ones with the best user experience, they are written natively, right? Native application development is how you build really great stuff. And Hyperledger is a really good example. It only just got tokenization, right? If I had wanted to build a proper tokenization app, right, Stellar doesn't support programmability. It does a great job with tokenization, but if I want to build like a really clever zero-knowledge proof-based business logic, I can't do that on Stellar, right? These platforms are not similar enough that you can abstract all the way back to that very high level. And if they did, I'd be somewhat skeptical. Now, there is a really interesting thing going on in China right now, which people are not talking about and haven't spent much time on. But the Chinese government is pursuing a regulatory regime that looks much more like a traditional telco model, where they require interoperation, they're going to require interconnectivity, and they're going to treat blockchain networks more like common carriers. And in so doing, they're going to force the networks to level each other up so that you could potentially do kind of cross-platform application development. But the interesting consequence of that may be that the networks all eventually come to resemble each other or even run on the same technology. Because if everything needs to run the same way on every network, then what's the point of having a lot of differentiation between the networks? I think it becomes quite difficult.
This conversation can go forever. All right, let's flip it. Who wants to go first, Andre or Eduardo?
go ahead, Andre, if you want.
All right, so go back to Paul. Like you're living in Kona's world, and then people are coming to you trying to understand your business process. Like, what would you tell people that are kind of coming in from the outside, and like, what do they need to know about how your business works that will like help them understand how to best serve you or help you think about it?
Yeah, I think we don't need to understand a lot, for example, how supply chain works, right? It's all pretty much the standard set of operations, and like Paul said, it's you have your assets, digitize them, and then you exchange them for money, right? So I think the best way for us to look into the system is if there's a system that we can adopt pretty quickly. We don't have to spend a lot of time on building up infrastructure or trying to figure out how to administer the network. I think this would increase the adoption across the enterprises. Maybe this is what they're looking for, but really do it not the old way. But I think what enterprise is trying to do is, they build the fabric solution, they build some solution, and they want to market it. They want to become this marketplace again. With blockchain behind it, because the blockchain is a good marketing proposition here. I think if we start seeing more and more of the systems that are open source, open frameworks, but really easy to adopt, this will help the adoption.
And what do you just find those points are where, like, when parties kind of come to you externally, like, where are those points that people are like really just standing out? Like, you could remember one or two examples where just people are not aligning, they don't understand, or they can't quickly adhere enough to like your internal practices or the various parties they need to communicate with.
Yeah, I don't think I can recall good example of it, but it just don't try to push. So you have a solution, you built it with your idea what the processes should be, and then you now try to go and push them for they don't necessarily align, and then now your system is not flexible enough to change, to adopt to the business processes or some specifics. I don't think this, if you see another vendor trying to pitch and sell you something on a blockchain, doesn't really work well, right? I think it needs to be adaptable, it needs to be pluggable. And
so people are coming in with like, this is my use case, this is the best thing, right? And like they can't budge from kind of their ideas a little bit.
Or spend a day or two with you doing the brainstorming or design thinking, understand how your processes work, and then this is how you can adapt. This is how you're gonna have enough components so you can come to a customer, get their recipe, and build a dish for them, right? So it needs to be what they like, what they used to eating, and it's not like, okay, I have a burger, but it only has this type of meat. Your system should be flexible enough to adapt to the requirement.
Got it. Eduardo, take us out here.
Okay, so I'll circle back nicely to my initial point. So focusing on AB InBev's strategy around the technology, right? So wrapping up all of what you three said in the last interventions, one thing that Paul mentioned was, to achieve a success at scale, it would be great to have a standard. It would be great to have a common application, a unique place where everyone agrees on formats and base layers to build applications on. And I think that tying this to the philosophy for innovation at AB InBev, the companies in enterprise have to analyze this environment, this unique standardized or like majorly utilized environment, and have to really understand, can we build something here that addresses our needs? Can we build something, like Andre said, that is flexible enough to be plugged in directly into our systems and benefit us as a company? Because at the end of the day, for enterprise, for companies, it is the good of the company and the interest of the company first, before even like radical changes in ideological movements of the economy or the way the economy should work. So if we find those synergies, if we identify a way to utilize this standard, unique, or predominant application or base layer technology for applications to be built on, and if we find that the applications we can build on this address sufficiently well our needs as a company and solve some of the challenges we have in a very efficient and nice way, then I think that enterprise will be convinced that they have to go there, and that, to Patrick's point earlier on, that we can find tens, if not hundreds of use cases for blockchain technology to be used to solve problems inside enterprise ecosystems. If those conditions are met, then I think that we can achieve what Paul was aspiring to, or was referring to earlier on, that enterprise should achieve in a few years, hopefully. Patrick, I'm not sure I can hear.
Yep. I don't know at what point you're tuning into this conference. I've already been on an interview with Paul this week. I know Eduardo. I've been on an interview with Andre as well. We might time shift this a bit. This is my last one. I'm done. I was a professional interviewer for 10 days, or maybe amateur interviewer. But this is a really great conversation. And who knows how many people will see this online later, right? But this is very interesting to me. Yeah, like you guys all have great perspectives. Like the minute I talked to Paul, never spoke with him before, I knew he had a really interesting perspective, right? Andre, Eduardo, I've got to spend some time with you guys over the last few months. Like I can't express enough for anyone listening that I feel like sometimes I sit in between maybe enterprise and engineers and a few other aspects, and I just see it across parties, especially when it comes to the public chains. Like I just feel like there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of parties. I really do believe that people don't understand how many people have to shake hands. You're not just battling a technology or battling. In some cases, saying the word Bitcoin or blockchain in the boardroom is bad, right? You'll get kicked out just for that, right? So the letter B becomes prevalent. Watch your letter Bs, minimize it to as many as you can. But, I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation. I know I did. And let's get out of here. I know these guys gave me even a little bit more time than I originally had. But, Paul, any last words? And we'll kind of go back around.
Thank you. You were an excellent convener, Patrick. Two very interesting people and a great conversation.
Andre.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for including me and Kona in this conversation. Very fruitful. I enjoyed it. What I would say in the enterprise world, what we should be thinking about is blockchain is all about sharing, right? Sharing data. I think the technology itself and the development in the enterprise world give more than you take from open source, right? Contribute and share what your findings are, what your progress is, and don't keep it internally. So I think this will help us to move in the right direction. Thank you.
Eduardo, you got to take us out.
Cool. Well, amazing. Thanks, Patrick, for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. I learned a ton from all three of you guys today, Paul, Andre, and Patrick also. And I think we're living a very exciting time, and I think it's still a embryo stage. So let's buckle up, guys, because this thing is going to disrupt the entire world. I believe it, and I think that if we manage to evangelize this idea in our companies, in the enterprise world, then we will flourish. We will make this truly achieve its potential.
Love it. Eduardo, Paul, you guys are both in San Francisco. You guys got to grab a socially distanced beer.
As soon as we're allowed to.
Whenever.
But it has to be an AB InBev beer.
Oh, yeah.
I think you have a good enough selection. We can find something.
For sure.
Hey, guys, appreciate your time. I think it was a very good conversation. Hope anybody watching, hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to keep going. 72 hours. Let's keep this going, and appreciate everyone's time. Have a good one, guys.
Stay tuned to learn more about student interest in blockchain technology. Reimagine 2020.